Okay. Today's talk, we're going to open with why it is we're practicing. If anyone wants to share why they practice, you're welcome to share it. It's a good question to ask. Why do we do this? Why? Ask yourself two questions. Why do I practice now? And why did I begin? Because the answer to those two questions may be different. Why do I practice now? Why did I begin? Also, if you don't want to open your mic, you can put it in the chat and I'll read it.
Well, I'll just begin, Ryan. It's because you invited me, or Dawn invited me, and I met you. I had no idea what I was doing or the path I was on, but I figured, what the hell, why not? And then today, I'm not so sure I have much more clarity beyond Dharma is pulling me, and things are being revealed, and my mind is getting clarified, or I'm becoming more familiar with it. I hesitate to say realization, enlightenment, nibbana, all of those terms, because I understand the trap that I fall in as soon as I say that. But if I'm being frank,
Yeah.
that is definitely a part of it. And at this point, yeah, I think there's something much more miraculous, majestic, magical going on beyond what I had ever imagined practice would provide to me. So yeah, that's where I'm at. Thanks, brother, for asking the question.
Good. I can share my reason too, and the next person can go. So when I was probably 15 or 16, I started with these plant medicines. And there was a drug called MDMA. And it just produced this profound opening of the heart. And I think with all the stories of like the heroes and the myths of history and superheroes and all this, there's always this thing with saving people or helping people and changing the world. And I definitely thought about my place or my role in that constantly as a kid and as a teenager. And when I discovered meditation and all of this, it initially was for the Bodhisattva vow. I had this idea that to actually the people that helped others most were these great philosopher sages. And I observed that was the case. Those were the most impactful people ever were saints and sages. So I was like, I want to be like them, and I'm gonna do anything. I'll do anything to be like them, to be able to help people like that. And that was my initial intention in the beginning. And when I took practice seriously and became invested in the systems and Buddhism particularly, it's funny, I forgot the reason that I began. It became about personal liberation and just wanting to discover the truth about things. And of course, that's a totally valid reason. But it wasn't my initial reason. My initial reason was I didn't want to live for myself, but for other people. Yeah, and the secondary reason became that I wanted to see if this thing called nirvana was real. So, anyone else? There was a good comment. What else would I do? There was only a desire to walk in love. So for the question for the two people that just popped in, the question is, why do we practice? Or what is your reason for practicing now and when you began? For me, I just shared that my reasons there were two reasons and they had changed. Yeah, what's your reason for practicing now, and what was your reason for beginning this whole journey? If you want to share it, either open your mic or you can put it in the chat.
I'm happy to share.
Sure.
It's a great question. I've reflected on this because my reason has definitely changed. I think at the beginning, I don't know, in my teenage years, it was mainly a sense of curiosity with the nature of reality. I mean, I think that's the constant. I think that's still something, a bit of a driver. But I was very curious about altered states of consciousness. I grew up in a Catholic school, and they, at least I felt like they tried to indoctrinate me, and that didn't feel good. Whenever I asked questions that they couldn't answer, they would get mad at me. And so I started to look for answers in philosophy. And I became a hardcore atheist. But then I encountered psychedelics, and that blew me wide open. And I realized I didn't know much. And so from there, it just became an exploration of going deeper, because it just seemed to be infinite. What is that? What are those? Yeah, I don't know. And then how does that relate to me? I just had this big question of, what am I doing here? Why me? Why am I me and not someone else? Why am I not that person in front of me?
Mm.
And now I feel like the questions have stopped, those types of questions, to a large degree, and it's mostly intuitive recognition of just like shedding assumptions, beliefs, and coming closer in touch with who I am. It just feels like momentum at this point more than anything.
Good. Yeah, one of my main reasons too, the pursuit of inner knowledge, or the pursuit of truth, ultimately.
Yeah, I would say for me, I think I started because I started meditating because of my ADHD, and I just wanted to be able to focus better. But I think I've always, since I was really young, I was always really fascinated by the universe, and I thought it was really strange why things are the way they are, and nobody really had an explanation. So I think for me, I also really wanted to understand the nature of reality. And that's why I started thinking about all these spiritual concepts. Um, and it's funny that at the same time I started meditating for a different reason, but maybe subconsciously I was also doing it for to gain spiritual clarity.
Mm,
And I think now it's just everything is just unfolding. Like I don't really have any control over it. I'm just following things just come to me like random things. Even meeting you, Ryan, or like being here in this chat right now. It's all just coming to me. So
so also pursuit of truth, understanding of, yeah.
I would say so.
Anyone else want to share?
Yeah, quickly, I'll just add, now that I'm thinking back and after listening to Alan Chapman, I'm looking at my life, like Fabian mentioned, maybe it was unconscious, maybe it was dharmic, like I said, leading me, but studied philosophy in high school. Tao Te Ching, I didn't understand a lick of it when I was a freshman, got drunk to try to understand it. um, but circled back to Taoism, did Taoist Tai Chi at 25, had no idea why. Again, like you were saying, I loved Bruce Lee, be like water, be water. So I mean, there's all these different just moments in my life that if I look back now, I'm like, oh my God, I was always on the path. I just didn't realize it. It wasn't like, oh, I'm gonna achieve nibbana enlightenment or any of that because I just didn't understand it. But I knew, man, I was definitely being called and led. And like I said, even finding you through Dawn, meditated with Dawn at 25, basically to pick up women. And yeah, I mean that, and then she circled back during COVID and asked me to meditate with her, met you. And like Fabian said, now it's just, yeah, I find teachers and there's openings and I go, like me and Carla going to see Adi Ashante and just, man, just so much is happening. It is miraculous and magical and karmic. It's all of that. So definitely no more secularism for me. That's for damn sure. So yeah, I wanted to put that in because I think there's something happening, Buddha nature, whatever you want to call it, Dharma. But it definitely ain't me. So
You become an honorary member of the Club of Woo.
yep, the woo woo crew, baby, the woo woo crew.
Yeah. Veteran travelers in the land of Woo. You know, that's where all of you are headed. So the reason I brought up this question is because it was brought to my attention by David, but this is a general sentiment, and I've seen it. It's very prevalent that awakening is not really possible. That what the Buddha had realized or what the masters of the past spoke of is gone. It has the Dharma has left our world, and that we're just stuck with the breadcrumbs and what's left in the scriptures and teachings. Most, there are millions of Buddhists and millions of Hindus and millions of Jains, millions of members of the various contemplative traditions in the world. And most of them are adherers by faith. So they all have their great sages and saints that had their writings, and those are the things those are the works that we refer to. But there's the general sense that for the common person or the average person, awakening is not possible. It's just for monks or nuns or special holy people. So even beyond monks and nuns, Even they don't have a chance. Just like the really exceptional people, awakening is limited to them. Unfortunately, we find that in the transmission of the teachings or the transmission of the Dharma, if the person transmitting the teaching doesn't have realization, and we have this go on for many generations, then more and more and more we begin to deviate from the fundamental point or the fundamental essence, which is our nature. The reason there's an enlightenment drive at all, the reason we began seeking at all, is because there was this unexplainable, mysterious calling to know ourselves. And maybe everyone has that at a certain point in their life, but when they pick up a vocation or they get busy with marriage and children, or they enter some mode of life, they decide, this is who I am, and these questions are not really answerable. So the best thing we can do is enjoy life and get drunk on the weekends and put away as much money as we can in our 401ks. It doesn't occur to them that there is reality beyond thought, that there is truth beyond the confines of our conceptual mind and understandings of things. Why some people are drawn to this and why others aren't, or why others get drawn to the point of asking those questions, but then they turn away, whereas others will look as long as they have to until they find the key to that gate. If philosophy isn't enough, if religion isn't enough, if this system or that system wasn't enough, at some point they think there has to be something, there has to be a way. Why that's the case for some people and not others is a mystery. But Buddhism, for example, says you have the karmic roots for it. That instead of suppressing the enlightenment drive or forgetting the enlightenment drive, that whim of the supreme to know itself, why in some people that gets discarded and in others it gets kindled, is a very mysterious thing. So the reason that practitioners are considered the most fortunate people is because of their roots, their mysterious roots. They have the conviction in teachings that lead to awakening. When you look at this world and you look at all the books that have been written, all the fiction that has been written, all the science that has been written, all the religion that has been written, and when you consider how much of that is about awakening from this dream, it's baffling. The total number of words pertaining purely to the awakening from this dream that have been written compared to the total number of words that is about the dream. That's why it's said that if you've met the Buddha, or you've met a sage, or you've met the teachings that were the encapsulations of them which survive in time, that you are the most fortunate beings in the universe. Because really everything else leads to a greater investment, a greater attachment. Everything else leads to further dreaming. That's why the Buddha called the Dharma, he said that the Dharma goes against the stream, it goes against the way of the world. The world and its affairs, the affairs of culture, the affairs of society, all of these encourage and deepen our sleep. So why do they say that the sages and the Buddhas and the saints are the lights of the world? Because the world is mired in the darkness of ignorance, of not knowing ourselves, of not knowing the Dharma, of not knowing awakening, of not knowing how we got here, where we were before, what will come after. It's really just the sages and saints and explorers of consciousness that illuminate these matters. Whatever it is your reason is or was for awakening, you eventually begin to see that whatever reasons you have or could have are arising from within your nature. They're appearing in this. Reason A, reason B, reason C. You can see it as whatever reason was needed or whatever reason was given to you to ensure that you'd wake up. You know, we don't know where our interests come from. We don't know why we're drawn to certain things. We don't know how reality organizes itself in such a way that we find the right person or we find the right book or we listen to the right talk, and then suddenly, when your whole life only this dream existed, suddenly in a single moment, you wake up. The mystery of that is profoundly deep. Whatever your reasons are, and on this whole point of enlightenment not being possible anymore, or awakening being this lost transmission, or people going so many decades without so many decades of practice and even so many years of monasticism, and they feel that they're still subject to the dream of their own mind, the dream of their own life. You know, when a person has been through that, it's easy to throw up our hands and say, hey, it's, you know, we're in the Dharma ending age. It's not possible for us. The truth is that this mind, this nature, this Buddha is timeless. if you were to attain your recollection of your past existences, you would see that in any existence you would zoom in on or point to, that mind was present in that existence. The people of the past, they all had consciousness. They all had their thoughts about reality. But they say that if a spiritual friend doesn't appear to point out the Dharma to you and to point out your nature, then you'll be lost. So in reviewing your lives, you can see that there were lives and worlds where there was no Dharma. There was no awakening. You know, it's not always a guarantee that in our unfolding in time that we meet these teachings, these gems that lead to an awakening from the dream. If you've been doing this a long time, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 30 years, and you wonder why it hasn't shifted or why you didn't realize this thing called nirvana. You can ask yourself a few things. Was the mind, was thought thoroughly abandoned? Was attachment thoroughly abandoned? Was the recognition of my nature ever confirmed? Did I actually think it was one thing, but actually it was something else? Did I go into retreat for long enough? Or did I stay too busy in my engagements with life and the world that I never really gave this the time it required? So this type of talk is all about, it makes it seem like enlightenment is something that you achieve, or awakening is something that you achieve, which isn't true. But when we look at the lives and the backgrounds of people that had this recognition or realization, I guess in modern times it's a little different because now there's the internet, so I guess awakening is more common these days. But 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when I began, it wasn't like this. And what was common in the biographies of people that had woken up? Some of them went into retreat for a year. Some of them practiced for very long periods of time. How exactly it happens or why is a mystery, but you see very often that there's a surrender to the enlightenment drive. And if that means going away for a year, then that's what the person does. If that means practicing every day, then that's what the person does. If that means giving up practice and Dharma completely, then that's what the person does. Whatever your attachments are, let them go. And that's the whole relative discussion, right? In the domain of action. The truth that's exactly parallel to it is that whether you let go or you hold on, it's still this. It's paradoxical. You're asked to renounce, you're asked to let go. You're asked to practice, you're asked to put forth effort. All along, it's just this. So how does that make sense? How does that make sense? It's because through the application of the effort, through the surrender, through the let go, through all the path factors, your ego gets thin enough to see it. Then you can say, oh, there was really nothing to let go of, and there was no one to let go of anything. So when people say the Dharma is lost, it just means they haven't met the right spiritual friend. The sentence that changed my life forever was, liberation is to know that you were never born. Liberation is to know that you were never born. How is that the case? How is it that I was never born? The body was born. My memories were born. My perceptions were born. My thoughts arise and pass. But reality is the unbroken Dharma. Your mind never actually wanders. It never actually goes anywhere. Just your attention does. But your mind doesn't wander. Your attention wanders. You may have more thoughts or less thoughts, but the mind, like reality, is never increasing or decreasing. Even when we talk about psychedelic experiences, oh, I'm going to lose it. I'm going to lose my mind. That's specifically referring to losing yourself and losing the capacity to orient oneself in time. It doesn't mean you lose reality. You lose the capacity to navigate conventional reality. And that is a sufferable condition, without a doubt. But it's always this. Start to see, and the reason that I teach, the reason that I say the same thing every week for the last 4 years is because as time goes on, as you see this more and more, all those parts of the consciousness that are holding the narrative in place, holding the thought in place that you're not enlightened, that you will be enlightened, that you want to become enlightened, all of these are assertions. I have become enlightened is a thought, that's a statement. I'm not enlightened, I'm not there yet, that's a thought, that's a statement. Where are both these thoughts and statements emerging from? Your nature. That's the supreme dharma. What doesn't increase or decrease? Your nature. This. Despite the various forms, the changes in the field of experience, the imminency and the immediacy of the field is unbroken. Dogen said impermanence is Buddha nature. It means that everything's changing. There's always just change. There's always just this room of experience. There's always just these 6 gates, these 6 sense gates: hearing, thinking, feeling, tasting, touching. Seeing, I don't know if I said that twice. Seeing. Just these 6 gates are the illumination. Oh, but they say the sense doors are impermanent. They're liable to suffering. They're liable. They're without self. True. But that's only the case when those concepts are regarded as real. The 3 characteristics of suffering, no self, and impermanence, they're applied to phenomena in Buddhism. All things are subject to these 3 characteristics. When the reality of things has vanished, when the reality of phenomena has come undone, everything arises as the Pure Land. Death becomes no death because it's Buddha. Suffering becomes no suffering because it's Buddha. Ignorance becomes no ignorance because it's Buddha. Karmic formations become no karmic formations because it's Buddha. Name and form becomes no name and form because it's Buddha. And on down the chain of dependent origination. The sense doors, the sense organs, contact, feeling, aging, birth, and death, all illumination. They even say it. Life and death is nothing but the Buddha, nothing but Buddha nature. So the 12 links of dependent origination, which is the mechanism of samsara, the mechanism which keeps the wheel of transmigration going. Dependent origination is only dependent origination when these various conditions are perceived as the designations we give them. The designations of conventional reality. In awakening, in realization, conventional reality vanishes. And the very links that were once the drivers of samsaric activity and the conditions which put us even deeper into the pit of suffering, they themselves are realized as awake, as illumination. It's like the wrathful and the peaceful manifestations. when you're in the bardo or you're in these transition states and you have all these, you have these fears, you have these concerns, you're moving around like a hungry ghost, you have this lack of clarity, and all these wrathful, ghoulish looking beings are around you, and you're not able to recognize that they're actually manifestations of your nature. So you take those appearances to be separate from you, outside of you, and then you're subject to the tortures of your own consciousness in the intermediate state. In the same way that the intermediate state responds like that, this is so similar to psychedelic experiences as well. Person comes into the room and they're not having a good time. They're getting that jittery, anxious feeling. It feels like they're going into a bad trip. How do you help them? You look at them with complete confidence and you say, "Oh yeah, that happens to everyone. It's gonna pass in a couple minutes. You're fine." And then what happens? They believe that, and then everything turns out fine. So this is the same with the transition states. The wrathful manifestations are the appearances of your own karma, your own dispositions, your own previous actions. So they say in the Tibetan teachings, if you're facing the wrathful manifestations and you're able to have enough recollection, say the mantra of Padmasambhava, or say the mantra of any deity, and the simulation will break. But even if you were to gain some degree of lucidity and give rise to loving kindness or compassion, for example, compassion is a big one. As soon as you start radiating compassion, the wrathful manifestations, their faces change, and they transform into the peaceful manifestations. They transform into angels. Like, what we're getting is a feedback loop, and that applies in a lot of areas. But yeah, whether let's say a final point I wanted to bring up. We have 10 minutes left. Is this statement, and even I've said this, that when crisis comes, that's when your practice really counts. Like, being able to confront or being able to handle very challenging situations is the mark of one's practice. And the reason that I don't entirely agree with that is because then you're tying this to a specific condition, which is your response to a situation. Your response to a situation can be trained. It could be something that's completely altogether different than your recognition of this. So it's not necessarily correlated, but it can be. I'll give you an example. If this realization has become so don't want to say deep, but it's possible that you've let go so much that you don't have the same conditioned responses anymore, or it's possible that there's been such a surrender of attachment that you don't have the same responses anymore, or it's possible that you wake up so much from the dream of your life that you don't have the same responses. But the reason that I don't say it's entirely correlated is because they're great teachers that couldn't break certain addictions. Nisargadatta is an example of one. Very, very realized being, but he couldn't quit smoking. And the smoking eventually killed him. So you'd say, well, if he was so realized, wouldn't he have been able to quit smoking? Not necessarily. Yeah, how's that possible? He clearly had a craving, and that was the reason that he smoked. If his realization was sufficiently deep, it should have, he should have been so able to overcome that he wouldn't have had that affliction. Well, this is the thing. You have to want to stop, right? So if you're so blown out that you don't care whether you're going to stop or not, whether you get cancer or not, and to the external world that looks like you failed as a person and you failed to take care of your body. Sure, that's like a conventional designation, and that's often how people see it. But we're not considering also that in deep awakening, you just stop giving a shit. That's also an outcome. That's also a possibility. Yeah. So with responses to circumstances or situations that are challenging, you're like, oh yeah, if his practice is good, he's not going to freak out. He's not going to have, he's not going to get angry, or she's not going to get angry. She's just going to be very peaceful, very zen. Well, we have so many examples of teachers like Marpa. Marpa's son. I think Marpa's son had a rock fell on his head or something, and he died. And he was sobbing and sobbing and sobbing, and someone approached him and was like, why, how is it that a master who's supposedly as enlightened as you are is sobbing over this? Awakening isn't the same thing for everybody. One person may be so blown out that you cut their leg off and there wouldn't be much of a reaction. But another person could be so blown out that they're moved by compassion always. And to see a rock crack the skull of their son, out of compassion for his condition, you'd be moved immensely to tears. It's not always the same thing for every person. We kind of have this like binary or monolithic thinking that people that are awakened, they all have to act and think the same way, when like in no other area of human development do we consider that to be the case. Just because you slip up, quote unquote slip up, like what does that even mean? Like you get upset in a situation, that's slipping up, like as if it's not a normal thing. So getting upset about what happens is a reflection of our attachments. So we're always being confronted. We're always being shown, what it is that we're attached to. And of course, you could do things to lessen your attachments, but the point is that your attachments are arising in this. And if the point, and if you're doing something to lessen your attachments, that means there's someone or something in there that wants to be less attached. So it's a self-perpetuating, self-eradicating program that is actually responsible for a great deal of the spiritual search. Yeah, you got business. Okay. Yeah, you're holding on to something. You have some attachment. That's this. That's appearing in this. That's a manifestation of this. That's also awake. So then we can enter this game of, okay, who has the least attachment possible? Who has the least attachment in the universe? Who has the least attachment in the world? I want to learn from that person. These are all just trips. You can eradicate your attachments. You can do that. Because the mind can do these things. So what? You can end mental proliferation. Because you can train that as a capacity. If you can train it as a capacity and you can make that happen, so what? You can enter all the jhanas, all the super samadhi states, and stay in them for hours or days at a time. But if you don't realize that they're just other faces of this, then you're still in the dream. Still bound to what happens, still bound to what occurs. The mind, your nature, is unaffected by the four seasons. The body is affected. Thinking is affected. Feeling is affected. Reality is not affected. The immediacy, the ever-presentness, never obstructed. It is the ultimate power. So whether in your particular configuration of this, you lose your attachments, you abandon your attachments, you abandon your reactions, you become a person that is at peace, you become a person who found themselves, you become a person that reached the top of the mountain. So what? All the mountains are within reality. There's all kinds of goals. Pick your trip, dude. Go for it. But it's seeing that it's within the dream that sets you free. All the other stuff is conditions. If I'm reacting, if my reactions are down, if my reactivity is down, if I don't have attachments anymore, then I'm a Buddha. No. A Buddha is unconditioned. Reality, illumination, this is all unconditioned. It can't be tied to just specific things. Yeah, these ideas of peace, happiness, bliss, bondage, suffering. It's all the dream. So yeah, through training, you can accomplish anything. Instant access to psychedelic realities, supernormal powers, and through training, your mind becomes so powerful. It becomes. I'll give you an example, and then we'll end. This is something that was revealed to me in what I call knowledge and conversation. So in the Western tradition, Western mystery tradition, a practitioner in magic has their communion with God, basically their Krishna Arjuna moment. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna comes to Arjuna and reveals the stages of yoga and the heart of non-duality and all of this. So in the Western magic system, this type of contact is the goal. And I inadvertently had this occur on a retreat a couple of years back. And whether this is absolutely true or actually true, can't be known. But it was an idea or it was presented to me. And one of those things of many that I didn't want to believe. So in this, it said a phenomena that we find with, for example, the Theravada system is there's these 4 stages, right? So if you get to the 4th stage or you experience cessation of perception, feeling, and consciousness, however many times, and certain mental fetters fall away, like the purity that opens up is so powerful after cessation that you could easily assume that you're fully enlightened. You're just like all of those attachments and crude mental afflictions are so far away from that consciousness, from where you are after that you're like, okay, I think I might have offed myself. So what I was shown was that just the very belief, just the very conviction that if you do X and Y, the result will be, okay, these mental afflictions now fall away. Conviction is strong enough to actually make that possible when your mind is that refined. So in other words, if you believe that if you attain X and Y, or if you attain cessation, and if you attain it enough times, if you've attained it, some systems say 4 times, if you've attained it 4 times, then you're off the wheel. And if in the text it says if you're able to go into it at will, then you're off the wheel. And if the teacher that's teaching you says that if you attain it 4 times, then you're off the wheel, then your belief and conviction can actually convince you that you're not capable of those feelings, of lust, of attachment, of whatever. And if you're living in isolation and you don't have any, stuff coming up, then you can go an entire lifetime without anything to trigger reactivity. And so there's a false assumption that you became fully liberated. So the conviction in achieving this or achieving that is sufficiently powerful to permanently change things about yourself. So I know people, they got to the fourth, quote unquote fourth stage, whatever, in their system, and then all these mental afflictions and dark night cycles that had been trailing behind them for a decade or longer, all of that goes away, and they attribute it to the realization of the thing itself. What was revealed to me was that it was attributed to your own beliefs. Once you so-called attain the thing, what happens next? You give yourself permission to stop. You give yourself permission to no longer suffer. You're like, oh, I did it. Now all those cycles are done forever. And it is possible that with a mind that is powerful enough, you will never experience those cycles again. But it's not because of the purity of what was touched. It was because of the power of one's convictions. So this thing that I oriented my whole life towards, when I finally walked through that gate, it was turned back on me as a lie. Like, yes, if you go through this, you attain this, or you master these samadhis or whatever, and then you'll have the sense that you're fully awakened because you believe it. And I was like, wow, that's devastating. By the way, it wasn't indicating that full Buddhahood is not possible. It's certainly that was indicated as possible, actually, but that this part of the mind that gets convinced and that believes that things are so absolutely is extremely subtle and pernicious. So I'm saying all attainments are within your nature, and it's not a thing to be obsessive or concerned about. You can make yourself do whatever, make yourself be whatever. But the point is to just see that that's happening in the dream of experience. So I hope I didn't take your Buddhist lollipop away from you. That's not what I intended to do. But it's to always to not depart from this fundamental point that whatever happens, whatever occurs, whatever you attain, whatever you do, whatever falls away, whatever you gain, whatever you release, whatever you surrender, is within the dream of action. But liberation is to know you were never born. Is to know that the dream is just the dream. Okay, everyone. I think that's good for tonight. Tomorrow again, we'll meet at 7, same time. And if you have any questions, you could ask them tomorrow. All right, everybody.
Thanks again, Ryan.
Thank you.
See you
Thank
soon.
you.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.
See y'all tomorrow.